My dad backed my golden child brother and ordered me to give up my late mother's cabin, but after he shattered my car window in front of my kids, I finally stopped begging. Can you even imagine your own father shattering your car window right there in front of your terrified kids? All because you wouldn't let his golden child brother steal the last piece of your mother's legacy? My family thought they could bully me, manipulate me, and break me into surrendering everything I held dear. But they made one fatal mistake. They pushed me too far. Asterisk, the price of a toxic legacy. I'm Lucas, and I'm a 35-year-old single dad to two incredible children, Chloe, who's 9, and Noah, 6. For as long as I can remember, my life has been defined by one inescapable, soul-crushing dynamic. I was the family scapegoat, and my older brother, Marcus, was the untouchable golden child. Our childhood home wasn't a family, it was a monarchy, and Marcus was the crown prince. If Marcus brought home a C, Dad would storm the school screaming about his unique learning style. If I brought home a perfect A, Dad would squint, interrogate me, and ask who I copied from. When Marcus was caught shoplifting in high school, it was a harmless prank. But when I, at 10, accidentally spilled juice on the living room rug, I was grounded for a month, forced to scrub until my knuckles bled. I learned early that fairness was a myth, but I also made a silent vow. I would never become like them. The chasm in our family became permanent when I was 11. My mom, my only buffer, passed away after a brutal battle with breast cancer. A few days after her funeral, I was standing outside the kitchen door, clutching a glass of water, and I heard Dad muttering to his brother. At least she got to leave. Now I'm stuck dealing with the quiet one. Whether he knew I was there, lurking in the shadows, never mattered. That was the exact moment I realized I was entirely on my own. I decided then that I would build a life completely separate from his toxic shadow, even if a pathetic, desperate part of me still hoped he'd wake up and love me someday. I married young, honestly, just desperate to create the family I never had. Chloe came, then Noah. But after Noah's birth, their mother admitted she wasn't cut out for parenthood. She packed her bags and left. It was a crushing blow, but I respected her honesty. From that day forward, it was just the three of us against the world. I worked grueling hours in a mid-level tech support role, taking on exhausting freelance coding jobs late into the night, just to keep a roof over our heads in Chicago. Marcus, meanwhile, bounced from one spectacularly doomed business venture to another. And Dad, he enthusiastically emptied his retirement savings to fund every single one of Marcus's million-dollar ideas. There was the artisanal organic dog food delivery that tanked in 3 months. The catastrophic crypto app that led to a minor fraud investigation. Every failure was miraculously someone else's fault. The market, the investors, the developers, and every financial bailout came directly from Dad's pocket. I never asked either of them for a dime. I paid my own way through community college, worked overnight stocking shelves, contributed to open source projects in my rare spare time, and focused entirely on my kids. The career opportunity that changed everything. Eventually, all those sleepless nights staring at lines of code paid off. A major prestigious software firm contacted me out of the blue about leading a massive regional AI development project. At first, I thought it was a sophisticated phishing scam. But after 6 grueling weeks of intense interviews, brutal technical assessments, and panel meetings, they formally offered me the position. It was life-changing. A high 6-figure salary, phenomenal health benefits, full relocation support if I wanted it, and flexible remote work so I could continue to be a present, active father. I sat at my kitchen table staring at the digital offer letter, while Chloe and Noah built a fort out of couch cushions. For the first time in my entire life, I let myself believe that my endless grinding and sacrifices actually meant something. I waited a full 24 hours before calling Dad. Experience had taught me to keep my expectations buried deep beneath the earth. But a small, foolish part of me thought this might be the achievement that finally made him proud. I called him on a Tuesday evening. Dad, I just got offered an incredible lead developer position at Company X, I said, my voice trembling slightly with excitement. Before I could even finish, the line went dead silent. Then, he interrupted, his voice sharp and suspicious. Wait, is this the same tech firm Marcus applied to last month? My stomach instantly plummeted into my shoes. A cold sweat broke out. I didn't know Marcus applied there, I stammered. Dad went quiet again. When he finally spoke, his tone was dripping with venom. They turned him down on Friday, but they hired you? How does that make any sense? Another suffocating silence. Finally, he muttered. They told him they were looking for someone with more open-source leadership. You must have manipulated them. Don't let this flute go to your head, Lucas. Click. He hung up. No congratulations. No pride. Just immediate, burning resentment that I had succeeded where his golden child had failed. I sat the phone down, feeling physically nauseous. I promised myself right then that I was done. I was never going to spend another second of my life chasing the ghost of his approval. The following Sunday was our mandatory once-a-month family lunch at a local diner. I was inches away from canceling, but I refused to hide. Chloe and Noah genuinely loved seeing their grandfather, and I wanted to give them one normal afternoon. I dressed them in their Sunday best and drove to the restaurant, bracing myself. We sat in the vinyl booth. Marcus barely looked up from his menu before sneering. Hope you're enjoying the job you stole from me. I didn't flinch. I looked him dead in the eye. I didn't steal anything, Marcus. I earned it. He let out a loud, mocking laugh that made several other patrons turn their heads. You earned it, please. You just got lucky. You probably told them some sob story about being a single dad to get pity points. Dad leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms comfortably. Marcus was undoubtedly their first choice. Lucas, you just fit some diversity quota, or they wanted someone cheaper. They made their decision, I replied, keeping my voice terrifyingly calm. They hired the person they believed was technically qualified to lead a multi-million-dollar project. Marcus's face twisted into an ugly snarl. You think you're better than me now? You think because you sit at a computer all day, you're suddenly the man of the house? No, I answered, my heart pounding a steady, heavy rhythm in my chest. I think the company evaluated our respective resumes, looked at my 10 years of actual coding experience versus your string of bankruptcies, and made the logical choice. I'm not apologizing for my success. Dad slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. You've always been an arrogant, selfish little brat. You should have withdrawn your application the second you knew your brother was in the running. Asterisk. The day I finally snapped, normally, the old Lucas would have swallowed the burning insult. I would have looked down at my plate, apologized to keep the peace, and let them trample all over my dignity. But as I looked at my son Noah, who was staring at me with wide, terrified eyes, something inside me permanently snapped. No, Dad, I said, my voice dangerously low. I have spent 35 years staying quiet while you excused every single failure, lie, and theft Marcus ever committed. I have spent my entire life watching you dismiss every single thing I've ever accomplished. That ends right now. The entire diner seemed to fall dead silent. Chloe stopped stirring her chocolate milk, sensing the massive shift in the atmosphere. I turned to my children, instantly softening my expression. Come on, guys, we're leaving. I stood up, threw a $50 bill on the table to cover our untouched food, gathered my kids, and walked toward the exit. Behind me, Marcus shouted, Yeah, run away and act dramatic like you always do, you coward. I didn't even turn my head. I pushed the heavy glass door open and walked out into the crisp afternoon air. Driving home, the silence in the car was heavy. Chloe reached her little hand forward from the back seat and touched my shoulder. Daddy, are you okay? I looked at her beautiful, concerned face in the rearview mirror, and for the first time in decades, a genuine, unburdened smile spread across my face. Yeah, sweetie, I finally am. Walking away didn't feel like a loss. It felt like I had just cut a massive, suffocating anchor from my neck. It felt like I was finally protecting my family. The week following the diner incident was incredibly peaceful. I buried myself in wrapping up my old freelance contracts and preparing for my new role. Life felt infinitely lighter without the constant looming dread of Dad's criticism or Marcus's passive-aggressive texts. One evening, while I was tucking Chloe into bed, she wrapped her arms tightly around my neck and whispered, Daddy, you smile a lot more now. Your eyes look happy. I kissed her forehead and silently promised myself I would never let anyone take that piece of peace away from us again. 3 days later, that peace was violently interrupted. A loud, aggressive pounding echoed through my house. I checked the security camera app on my phone and saw Marcus standing on my porch, pacing like a caged animal. I opened the door but kept my body firmly blocking the threshold. What do you want, Marcus? I asked, my voice flat. He tried to brush past me, but I didn't budge an inch. He scoffed, looking over my shoulder at my modest living room. Not a bad setup for a guy who stole his brother's career, he muttered. Anyway, Dad's giving me the lake house. My stomach tightened into a painful knot. The cabin in Wisconsin. Yep, Marcus said, a smug, sickening grin spreading across his face, signing the deed over to me next week. I've already got a buyer lined up. Going to use the cash to launch a new logistics startup. It's a guaranteed gold mine. That cabin had belonged to our mother's family for over 60 years. It was the only tangible piece of her we had left. More importantly, I had been the sole person maintaining it for the last decade. I'd spent countless weekends up there. I personally replaced the rotting cedar roof shingles, overhauled the rusted plumbing, paid $18,500 out of my own pocket for a new foundation and water heater, and spent every spring clearing the property of winter debris. Marcus hadn't set foot on that property in 5 years. Dad says someone responsible needs the capital, Marcus sneered, clearly waiting for me to explode. And since you're so rich now you don't need it. I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I didn't plead. I just pointed a rigid finger toward the street. Get off my property, now. He chuckled, thinking I was bluffing. Or what? I stepped forward, closing the distance between us, letting the absolute zero in my eyes do the talking. Seriously, Marcus, leave. Right now. Something in my posture must have finally convinced him that I wasn't the punching bag he grew up with. The smirk vanished. He took a step back, muttered a string of curses under his breath, and marched back to his car. I locked the deadbolt, turned around, and immediately knew exactly what my next move had to be. The battle for my mother's legacy. I wasn't going to sit at home and stew in anger. I grabbed my keys, told the babysitter I'd be back in an hour, and drove straight to Dad's house. I didn't knock. I used the spare key I still had and walked right into his living room. He was sitting in his worn recliner watching a golf tournament. He jumped slightly when he saw me, immediately muttering, "You could have knocked." "We need to talk right now," I demanded, standing tall in the center of the room. He muted the television, crossing his arms defensively. "If this is about the cabin, my mind is made up. Marcus just told me you're signing it over to him so he can sell it," I said, keeping my voice dangerously steady. "It's my property to do with as I please," Dad fired back. "It was Mom's family cabin first," I corrected him. "And I have been the only one maintaining it for 10 years. You know that." "That was your choice," he yelled, his face turning red. "Marcus needs this break. You have a 6-figure job, a house, and kids. Marcus is struggling. He needs the capital for his new business." "You mean his next failure?" I shot back before he could dodge the reality. "I have paid for the roof, the plumbing, the structural repairs, the insurance, the property taxes, and every single seasonal maintenance fee. Show me one single receipt with Marcus's name on it." "Just one." Dad looked away, unable to meet my gaze, but quickly recovered his arrogant posture. "She isn't here anymore, Lucas. I'm making the decisions now. Your brother needs this, and you're going to stop being selfish and let him have it." The words landed exactly the way he intended, like a knife to the chest. Years ago, I would have cried. I would have argued until my throat was raw, begging him to see my worth, begging him to honor Mom's memory. Instead, I felt nothing but a cold, hard clarity. I nodded once slowly. "I understand. I know exactly where we stand now." He frowned, his brow furrowing in confusion. He was entirely prepared for a screaming match. He didn't know how to handle my icy acceptance. "That's it?" he asked. "That's it," I said, turning my back on him. "Lucas, don't make this into something it doesn't have to be," he called out as I reached the door. I paused, looking at him over my shoulder one last time. "No, Dad, you've been making this into a nightmare for 25 years. I'm just finally done pretending otherwise." I walked out and let the door click shut behind me. I drove straight home. I didn't panic. I went directly to the heavy steel filing cabinet in my home office. Inside were 10 years of meticulous, obsessive records, every single receipt for roofing materials, every invoice from the plumbers, every property tax payment I had made on Dad's behalf, every insurance document, every bank statement, and hundreds of time-stamped photographs I had taken after completing repairs. I carried the heavy boxes to the dining room and spread the thousands of documents across the large mahogany table. Chloe wandered in, holding her stuffed bear, her eyes wide at the sea of paper. "What are you doing, Daddy? Are you doing homework?" I smiled, pulling out an empty binder. "Actually, sweetie, I'm organizing some very important history. Do you want to help me?" For the next 4 hours, Chloe handed me plastic sleeves while Noah stacked photographs into neat chronological piles. They had no idea they were helping me build the legal weapon that would eventually secure their grandmother's legacy. The very next morning, I called Mr. Vance, a ruthless, highly recommended real estate and estate litigation attorney my new boss had referred me to. I sat in his plush downtown office and laid out my situation. I didn't want to sue for money. I just wanted to know if I had any legal standing to block the sale of a property I had single-handedly preserved. Mr. Vance listened in absolute silence for 20 minutes. When I finished, he leaned forward, steepling his fingers. "Do you have documentation proving these financial contributions?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the pictures of the dining room table covered in 20 boxes worth of organized receipts and invoices totaling tens of thousands of dollars. A slow, predatory smile spread across Mr. Vance's face. "Excellent. Do not confront them again. Let them think they have the upper hand. We are going to build an impenetrable wall." I spent the entire weekend scanning every single piece of paper, organizing the digital files by year, labeling every contractor invoice, and backing everything up to 3 different cloud servers. I built a master spreadsheet detailing every penny spent, every hour of labor logged, and every email Dad had ever sent me acknowledging that I was the one paying for the cabin's upkeep. By Monday, Mr. Vance called me back. "Your case is incredibly strong. Under the laws of equitable interest and unjust enrichment, they cannot simply liquidate an asset you have heavily capitalized without compensating you or clearing the title. Keep gathering records. And Lucas, be careful. Families like yours tend to escalate violently when they realize they are losing their grip on you." His warning was terrifyingly prophetic. A week later, my new company published a glowing press release on LinkedIn announcing my hiring as the lead regional developer. Hundreds of colleagues, former clients, and friends flooded the comments with congratulations. Buried at the very bottom was a single venomous comment from Marcus. "Enjoy the stolen glory while it lasts, you backstabbing snake." Instead of engaging, I calmly took a screenshot, emailed it to Mr. Vance's paralegal for the harassment file, and permanently blocked Marcus's account. Asterisk, the vandalism that sealed their fate, asterisk. That Saturday, I decided the kids and I needed a break from screen time. We drove to a large, beautiful park on the north side of the city. We spent 3 glorious hours climbing the jungle gym, feeding the ducks by the pond, and eating warm pretzels from a vendor. It was perfect. Watching Chloe and Noah laugh under the autumn sun solidified my resolve. I would never let the toxicity of my father and brother infect their lives. As we walked back to the parking lot, my kids holding my hands, Chloe suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. "Daddy, what happened to your car?" I looked up. The driver's side window of my SUV was completely shattered. Millions of glittering shards of safety glass blanketed the driver's seat and the pavement. My heart slammed against my ribs. Before I could even process the vandalism, a sickeningly familiar voice echoed from across the parking aisle. "That's exactly what you deserve." I whipped around. Dad was standing 20 feet away, leaning against the hood of his truck, his hands casually stuffed in his pockets. He was looking at me with a twisted expression of triumph and malice, completely devoid of any regret. Noah screamed and buried his face in my leg, his tiny hands gripping my jeans so tightly it hurt. Chloe started sobbing instantly, terrified by the shattered glass and her grandfather's cruel face. Adrenaline flooded my veins. Every instinct screamed at me to charge at him, to physically tear him apart for terrorizing my children. But Mr. Calling, Vance's voice echoed in my head. "Document everything." I took a deep breath, pulled my phone out of my pocket, hit record on the camera, and held it up openly. I stepped in front of my crying children, shielding them with my body. "Did you just say I deserve this?" I asked, my voice projecting clearly over the wind. Dad didn't even flinch. He sneered right into the camera lens. "Yes, you've been acting like an arrogant prick ever since you stole your brother's job. You needed to be brought down a peg." "Did you shatter my car window, Dad?" I asked, keeping the camera steady on his face. He smirked, a nasty, ugly curl of his lip. "Maybe next time you'll learn your place and stop embarrassing your family, Lucas." That was the nail in his coffin. "We're done here," I said coldly. Without breaking eye contact, I dialed 911 on my smartwatch, putting the dispatcher on speakerphone. "Yes, I need police at Centennial Park immediately. A man just vandalized my vehicle and is verbally threatening me in front of my young children. I have it all on video." Dad's smug expression instantly evaporated, replaced by genuine, wide-eyed panic. He had fully expected me to yell, cry, or beg for his love like I had when I was a teenager. He never in a million years expected me to immediately invoke the law. He stood frozen for 3 seconds before scrambling into his truck and speeding out of the parking lot. I kept the camera rolling, capturing his license plate perfectly as he fled. I knelt down, pulling Chloe and Noah into a tight embrace, kissing the tops of their heads while we waited for the sirens. "It's okay, guys. Daddy's got you. Nobody is ever going to hurt us." When the police arrived, I calmly handed my phone to the lead officer. He watched the video, grimaced at Dad's words, and inspected the shattered window. "He practically confessed on tape," the officer muttered. "Do you want to press charges?" "Absolutely," I said without a microsecond of hesitation. "I want a full report. I want to press charges for destruction of property, and I need documentation for a restraining order." I gave the police Mr. Vance's contact information, filled out every form, and arranged for a tow truck. Instead of letting the trauma ruin the day, I called an Uber, took the kids to their favorite artisanal ice cream parlor, and bought them the biggest sundaes on the menu. While they ate, Chloe looked up, her eyes still a little red. "Daddy, why is Grandpa so mad at us? Did we do something bad?" My heart shattered, but I looked her directly in the eyes. "No, baby, you did absolutely nothing wrong. Grandpa has a sickness in his heart. He makes very bad choices. But my only job in this entire world is to keep you and your brother safe. And that is exactly what I am going to do. He will never yell at you again." That night, after the kids were asleep, I emailed the police report number, the video file, and the repair estimates to Mr. Vance. His reply came back 3 minutes later. "Brilliant composure, Lucas. Do not contact him. Let them hang themselves." I blocked Dad's number, but my carrier allowed voicemails to pass through to an archived folder. Over the next 48 hours, he left 14 voicemails. They ranged from furious screaming about how I was tearing the family apart to pathetic, tearful manipulation, claiming I was brainwashing his grandchildren. I didn't listen to them twice. I just forwarded the audio files directly to the law firm. Marcus texted from a burner phone. "You called the cops on your own father over a window? You are dead to us. Drop the charges or else." Screenshot. Forward to lawyer. Block. Asterisk, the final terms of our separation. 2 weeks later, the hammer dropped. A certified courier arrived at my front door holding a thick manila envelope. Inside was a formal civil lawsuit filed by Marcus and Dad. Marcus had hastily tried to push the sale of the cabin through a sketchy real estate broker to secure a $250,000 loan for his new logistics company. However, during the title search, the title company flagged massive unresolved ownership issues connected to Mom's estate because she died without a fully updated will. And because I had established a massive, documented financial footprint on the property, the title was clouded. They couldn't legally sell it without my signature releasing my interest. Instead of acting like rational human beings and negotiating, Marcus's cut-rate lawyer filed a lawsuit demanding the court strip me of any claim to the property, accusing me of malicious interference with the lawful transfer of family assets. I didn't panic. I didn't feel a drop of fear. I loaded my massive plastic bins of records into the trunk of my rental car and drove straight to Mr. Vance's office. I dropped the lawsuit on his mahogany desk. He read the complaint, his eyes scanning the aggressive legal jargon. When he finished, he didn't look worried. He looked absolutely elated. "Lucas," Mr. Vance laughed softly. "This is a gift. This is better than I could have ever orchestrated. They have forced the issue into a court of law without doing a single ounce of discovery to see what evidence you actually possess. They have walked blindfolded into a minefield." I opened the first storage box. I brought everything. For the next month, Mr. Vance and I built a legal fortress. We didn't rely on emotional pleas or family history. We relied on cold, hard, indisputable mathematics. We built chronological binders containing every single receipt for the $18,500 plumbing and foundation work, the $6,000 roof replacement, the hundreds of landscaping invoices, and the property tax checks I had written. We included the time-stamped photographs of me physically hammering nails into the deck while Marcus was off in Europe blowing Dad's money. We even found old emails from Mom, written a year before she died, explicitly stating her dream that the cabin would be a shared sanctuary for both her sons' families. "They are operating under the delusion that this is just a family squabble," Mr. Vance said, tapping the massive stack of binders. "Once a judge sees this paper trail, combined with a police report of your father violently attacking your property, they are going to be slaughtered." We filed our blistering counter-response. We formally challenged the transfer of the deed, placed a legal lien on the property for the exact amount of my financial contributions, plus interest, and requested a full forensic accounting of Dad's financial transfers to Marcus over the last decade to prove Marcus was already heavily compensated from the family estate. 3 days after we served them, Marcus showed up at my house again. This time, I didn't even open the door. I spoke to him through the Ring doorbell camera, hitting the record button. "What do you want, Marcus?" I asked through the speaker. He looked exhausted, his eyes sporting dark, heavy bags. He stared into the camera lens, trying to look intimidating, but failing miserably. "Can we stop this, Lucas? You filed all these crazy motions just because you're throwing a tantrum. Dad is stressing out, his blood pressure is through the roof. Just sign the quitclaim deed so I can get my business funded." I actually laughed out loud in my living room. "No, Marcus. You sued me because you were too stupid to check the title before trying to sell property you didn't own. You forced my hand." He rubbed his temples aggressively. "You're really willing to destroy this family over a stupid wooden shack in Wisconsin?" "I didn't destroy this family," I replied, my voice echoing through the porch speaker. "Dad destroyed this family 20 years ago when he decided you were a god and I was garbage. You destroyed it when you decided you were entitled to everything I bled to maintain. I'm just enforcing the consequences." He stared at the camera for a long time before spitting on my welcome mat and storming off. Another video saved. Another piece of evidence logged. The preliminary hearing took place a month later. Marcus arrived at the courthouse wearing a flashy, clearly expensive suit that looked completely out of place. Dad walked in beside him, glaring at me with pure, unadulterated hatred. I sat calmly next to Mr. Diane Vance, wearing a modest navy suit, feeling completely at peace. When Marcus's lawyer stood up and pompously argued that I was a disgruntled sibling trying to hijack a simple family transfer, Mr. Vance didn't argue. He simply stood up and requested permission to approach the bench. He slid the first 2 massive 500-page binders of evidence onto the judge's desk. "Your Honor," Mr. Vance said smoothly, "this is not speculation. This is over a decade of documented obsessive financial stewardship by my client. He has invested over $45,000 in capital and labor into this property to prevent it from falling into ruin, while the plaintiffs contributed nothing." The judge, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, opened the binder. The courtroom was dead silent as she spent 10 agonizing minutes flipping through the pristine records, the invoices, the canceled checks, and the photographs of me repairing the roof. She paused on a photo of Chloe as a toddler sitting on the newly rebuilt porch. Finally, the judge looked up, her expression hardening as she locked eyes with Marcus. "Mr. Cobb, brother's last name, can you provide the court with any comparable documentation showing your financial contributions to the maintenance of this estate over the last 10 years? Marcus swallowed hard. He looked at his lawyer, then at Dad, and finally mumbled into the microphone, "No, Your Honor, but it's family property." "This court deals in facts and equity, not family entitlement," the judge snapped, cutting him off instantly. She looked at Dad. "And I see here in the counter filing a police report detailing an incident where you shattered the defendant's car window in the presence of minors. Is this accurate?" Dad's face drained of all color. "That was a misunderstanding, Your Honor. I highly doubt the police report and the video evidence are a misunderstanding." The judge replied coldly. She refused to issue a summary judgment in their favor and ordered us into mandatory mediation, warning Marcus's lawyer that if they proceeded to a full trial, they were looking at potentially massive financial penalties and a forced partition sale where my liens would be paid out first, leaving them with pennies. The momentum had completely shifted. The predators suddenly realized they were trapped in a cage with the prey they had underestimated their entire lives. The mediation took place 2 weeks later in a neutral conference room. The mediator, a retired judge, sat at the head of the table. Marcus looked desperate. Dad looked like he had aged 10 years. Their lawyer looked incredibly frustrated with his own clients. "Lucas, this has gotten entirely out of hand," Marcus pleaded, dropping the tough guy act completely. "My investors are pulling out. If I don't get this capital this week, I'm ruined. Name your price. What do you want?" "Name your price. What do you want?" Dad chimed in, his voice shaking. "Just sign the paper, Lucas. You don't even use the cabin that much. You can buy your own vacation home with your fancy new tech salary." I looked at both of them, feeling absolutely nothing. No anger, no sadness, just a clinical detachment. "It's not about buying another house, Dad. It's about protecting the one thing Mom wanted us to have, and it is not for sale." The mediator leaned forward. "Mr. Propt. My last name. What are your conditions for settlement?" Mr. Vance slid a single crisp folder across the table. I looked directly into Marcus's eyes and dictated the terms that would end the war. "Here is my final, non-negotiable offer," I said, my voice cutting through the room like a scalpel. 1. You dismiss this frivolous lawsuit with prejudice immediately. 2. Dad signs the deed of the cabin over to me entirely, today. 3. Both of you sign legally binding affidavits permanently waiving any future claims to the property or Mom's estate. 4. You sign a permanent no-contact order regarding me, Chloe, and Noah. If you agree to all of this right now, I will drop the civil damages for the car window. I will drop the request for a forensic audit of Dad's finances, and I will walk away and never speak to either of you again." Marcus slammed his fists on the table, his face turning purple. "You're stealing the cabin. You're blackmailing us." "No, Marcus," I replied evenly, not blinking. "I am offering you a way out of illegal slaughter. If we go to trial, I will win. The judge has already seen the evidence. If we go to trial, my liens will eat up the entire value of the property. You will get nothing, and Dad will likely face criminal charges for the vandalism if I push the district attorney, sign the papers, or we go to court and I take everything." The room fell into a suffocating silence. Marcus looked at his lawyer, desperate for a loophole. His lawyer simply shook his head, a silent confirmation that they were utterly defeated. Dad stared at me, his eyes wide, finally realizing that the quiet, obedient punching bag he had abused for 35 years was completely gone. In his place was a father who would burn the world down to protect his peace. "You're really going to cut your own flesh and blood off over this?" Dad whispered, his voice cracking. "You cut me off the day Mom died," I answered coldly. "I'm just making it official on paper." It took them 45 minutes of agonizing whispering in the hallway, but they broke. They had no money to fight a protracted legal battle, and Marcus's desperate need for cash meant he couldn't afford to have the property tied up in litigation for years. They came back in defeated and signed every single document Mr. Vance put in front of them. When the final signature was inked, Mr. Vance collected the papers, shook the mediator's hand, and we walked out. I didn't say goodbye. I didn't look back. As I stepped out of the courthouse and into the bright Chicago sunlight, I didn't feel victorious or triumphant. I just took a massive, deep breath, and for the first time in my life, my lungs felt completely clear. The aftermath unfolded exactly as Mr. Vance predicted. Without the cabin to sell, Marcus's logistics startup imploded before it ever launched. He burned through the absolute last of Dad's dwindling retirement savings, trying to keep it afloat, and eventually had to file for bankruptcy. Dad tried to call a few extended family members to smear my name, claiming I had manipulated the courts to steal his property. But court records are public. A few aunts and uncles read the actual filings, saw the sheer volume of my financial contributions, and saw the police report about the shattered window. Dad was quietly ostracized from the family text threads. They are now stuck in a tiny apartment together, drowning in debt, with absolutely no one to blame but themselves. My life, on the other hand, blossomed. My new boss, Sarah, was incredibly supportive. I thrived in the new role, receiving a massive bonus at the end of my first year because my AI project launched ahead of schedule. The money was great, but the respect I received in that office, being judged solely on my merits and hard work, repaired something deep inside my soul. When summer arrived, I packed my SUV to the brim with paint, tools, fishing rods, and groceries. Chloe, Noah, and I drove up to the Wisconsin cabin. It was officially, legally, ours. We spent the first 3 days working side by side. Chloe meticulously painted the flower boxes a bright, cheerful yellow, while Noah helped me sand down Mom's old wooden porch swing, his little face covered in sawdust and a massive grin. One evening, as the sun was setting over the glass-like surface of the lake, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and purple, we sat on the newly stained deck. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of the water against the dock and the distant call of a loon. Chloe leaned her head against my shoulder, holding a mug of hot cocoa. "Daddy," she asked softly, "do you think Grandma is happy we're here?" I looked around the property. I looked at the solid roof I had built, the cleared paths, and the safe, peaceful sanctuary I had fought tooth and nail to secure. I kissed the top of my daughter's head. "Yeah, sweetie," I whispered, tears finally pricking the corners of my eyes, not out of grief, but out of profound gratitude. "I think she's incredibly happy. I didn't just win a lawsuit or a piece of real estate. I broke a generational curse. I proved to myself that I was worthy of respect, and I showed my children that they never have to tolerate abuse to earn love. Dad lost his son and his grandchildren. Marcus lost the golden ticket he tried to steal. But I gained the whole world, and I didn't have to shatter a single window to do it. Ask call to action, ask call list? Hearing their whispers, seeing my dad's face that day, it felt like a lifetime of hurt finally exploded. What would you have done in my place? Have you ever had to draw such a hard line with family to protect yourself or your kids? Let me know in the comments below. I truly want to hear your thoughts.